box now. It's time for Fresh Rubber. Hello, welcome back to Fresh Rubber. Gavin, was that not the most amazing race you've ever seen in your entire life? Go on, let's start there. As high as it gets. That was amazing. What do you think?
I always talk about this, my partner, my mysterious partner, but I was on the phone to her. She was working all day. She couldn't watch it. She's on the ferry home. And I just said to her, this is the wildest ride you are going to watch. And she was like, yeah, she's still only got 5 minutes through it. She's putting the kids to bed and then she is going to be on the TV watching it. But man, what a race. This is everything that I want from a race. And I think we should call this podcast Wet and Wild. What do you think?
I love it. Key question I've got for you as we're recording this. Can you see her facial reactions as she's watching the race? Do you have line of sight to her?
No.
Rats. Okay.
I do not.
That would have been...
She's on the laptop.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack about the 2025 British Grand Prix.
So much.
From start to finish, it was an epic race. It was... it had highs and lows, and I think the first time in my F1 time when I've seen the tears of a robot. We've seen the emotions of someone who otherwise has none.
Thank you for bringing this right to the fore, Jace. The tears of a robot.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, so if you haven't seen the race, stop listening to this right now and go and watch the race.
Go watch it.
It was amazing. Then come back and at exactly whatever this timestamp is. So the key moment here is 11 or so, lap 13 of the race. Safety car came out. The conditions were treacherous. You could barely see what was happening even going behind the safety car. And on lap, I want to say 17, Piastri, noticing that the safety car had gone back into the pits, so it was about time for him to restart the race. He slowed on the hangar straight. Verstappen goes straight past him. He did not see that he'd slowed down. Immediately slowed down himself. Piastri comes forward, resumes the lead of the race, off they go, and 1 or 2 laps later the stewards come out and issue a 10-second penalty for erratic driving under the safety car restart procedures. So from there to the end of the race, Piastri is trying to build up a 10-second gap to his teammate behind who's in P2. He fails to do it, serves his 10-second penalty at the pit stop, comes out behind Norris and is unable to reclaim the lead of the race. So he finishes second, and he is not happy about that at all. He climbs out of the car. He congratulates Norris, sure, but he gives the saltiest interview that you'll see after a race, I think, in a long time, and had not a single positive thing to say about his teammate winning his home Grand Prix. Made the cool-down room as awkward as it comes. Piastri was not a happy chappy at the end of the race.
So love to see the tears of a robot in this moment. It's what we need from Piastri is to see him feel something, and that's exactly what we saw. And I think actually what he was feeling was a lot of anger at himself. I think it's the classic situation where you know you've done something really stupid. Another great name for the podcast tonight, rather than Wet and Wild, could be the greatest fumble of all time. Because that guy had that race on lock. There was no way anyone else was going to win today until he did a 100 mile per hour speed drop and a 60 psi brake. He put his foot down, and like you said, Jace, behind the safety car, Max went flying past. Max was like, what is going on? Everyone, the commentators, everyone was like, there's something really not right about this. And I think it was interesting actually, because he said he saw the lights of the safety car ahead go out, and that's why he braked, because when the safety car goes in, you become the safety car, right? That's the way it works. But dropping 100 miles an hour is pretty dramatic. And I think when he was in the cool down room talking to Hülkenberg about it, he was kind of giving his case, saying, I saw the lights on the safety car go off. I don't think I did anything wrong. And Hülkenberg wasn't having any of it. He was like, yeah, to be honest, mate, it concertinaed up the whole pack and we all had to get out of the way. What you did meant that everyone behind you was in a dangerous situation. So I think the penalty's fair, and I think Piastri is angry with himself. I think what was really interesting, though, was watching Piastri take a leaf out of the Verstappen playbook. You know, when Verstappen is in a press conference and he's really moody, he's taken over this last year or so, as he's not been winning so much, to kind of saying, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to answer any questions. It was like Piastri had learnt from Verstappen and was kind of coming out of his playbook, and he was like, I'm not going to talk about it in case I get into trouble. Like almost playing the bad boy. And it's like, Piastri, you are the least bad boy person in that whole grid. You don't quite have the gravitas of Max to play the bad boy, but good try,
You're not
buddy.
quite cool enough to make it stick, mate.
You're not quite cool enough. He was fuming.
Okay, so there's so many things I want to cover tonight, and I love all the points you've made. I disagree with a few of them, and I'd love to unpack them. But let me just say, what a buzzkill Oscar Piastri was in that cool-down room as well. Hülkenberg, who is something like 14 years his senior, has been on the grid since 1992, and finally gets his podium, the long-awaited podium. And he is buzzing, he's jumping, people chanting, Nico, Nico, Nico. And he goes into the cool-down room, and all he is greeted by is a fuming Oscar Piastri, who's trying to argue his case with him. That was gold. And then, I don't know if you noticed, Lando Norris comes in, and bless his cotton socks, Nico Hülkenberg doesn't really know what to do in the cool-down room, because he's never been there before. And so
He puts his helmet in the wrong place, doesn't he?
I think he put it in the right place, but Lando comes in and he's like, do you need help with that? Do you need help with your helmet, mate? You know, it was like so sweet. Nico Hülkenberg, just amazing. And as a small aside, I don't know if you saw, they had an F1 movie premiere in Times Square recently, and all the drivers were there. And there's a highlight video of the drivers and kind of, you know, reacting to the movie. And Nico Hülkenberg got a lot of love for the outfit that he wore to that event. People saying he actually looks like more of a movie star than Brad Pitt. So Nico Hülkenberg is getting a lot of love from the world at the moment.
Can we just take a moment to recognise, just to drill down on Hülkenberg, 239 starts in his F1 career, a run from P19 up to P3, and this was his first ever podium. This was huge. The celebrations down at Kick were way dwarfed the celebrations at McLaren, or you know, it might have been one of the biggest celebrations that I've ever seen. It was fantastic. Couldn't happen to a nice guy.
You could tell that it really meant a lot to them, to him and to them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Beautiful moment.
Now, you said you disagreed with a few things, and then you kind of started talking about an F1 movie and a red carpet. Yeah. Let's drill down on where we disagree.
Cool. Okay, so coming into this,
You can't just say stuff like that and then just kind of meander off, Jace. Come on, let's get into it.
Keep me accountable. Cool. Okay, so I had a look at a few articles which pulled out the telemetry of the laps behind the safety car, and that lap, when he did that braking maneuver on the hangar straight, it was identical to a lap that he'd done one or two laps before. So it was not the first time, it was not the only time that he did that. It was like part of his tyre warm-up procedure. I think the timing of the safety car lights going out and coming in was sort of split-second coincidental with that, but he had done that before. So you got to ask, if he'd done it before, why was it okay before? Or if he'd done it before, why didn't he get penalised twice? I think there's something about the stewards' inconsistencies here that make that penalty actually feel quite unfair. And then also, when the safety car comes in, I don't know if you've noticed this over the last couple of years, at least this year, the safety car procedures have been very slow. So the safety car seems to be out for a really long time. And at the British Grand Prix, they pulled the safety car in with like 2 or 3 corners to go on the lap. It was really, really late for that safety car to come in. Usually they give at least half a lap notice to the drivers that the safety car is in this lap. And that gives the safety car plenty of time to disappear off and go into the pits, and for the lead driver to then have a think about how they're going to restart the race. But as it was, safety car disappears at about the same time in the lap when Piastri is doing his warm up of the tyres procedure, and there's really poor visibility. So Verstappen comes way too fast, coming past him at that same moment on the track where he would have been the laps previous, and gets caught off guard. So Verstappen was going too fast. At that point, with the safety car coming in, Piastri is the de facto safety car. He's the one who sets the pace. So if you go faster than the leader, it's on you. It's not on the leader. That's my view. So I think it's an unfair penalty. If it's okay for him to do it on one lap but not the other, then it's inconsistent stewarding.
I'd love to look at that, because I think a drop in speed by 100 miles an hour and a 60 psi braking depression is absolutely fair reason. And I think the fact that the other drivers like Hülkenberg felt that concertina effect back into the pack really kind of hammers that home, that actually, and there's an argument to say that actually Piastri was doing that to slow everyone down, to cool tyres behind him.
It's the normal thing. At the end of a safety car period, the lead driver becomes the safety car, the pace setter. They always do that.
We've all watched 100 races. I've never seen someone brake so hard and drop speed so fast. I've seen plenty of drivers get slow and kind of back the pack up, but I've never seen someone slam on the brakes like that. So I disagree. I think it was absolutely warranted. But we could talk about this all day, but I'm not sure our listeners want to hear us go back and forth and okay. Argue the point. So it's one of those ones where it's probably one of those ones where people, I think your arguments are valid. I think you could go back and forth on it.
I think it's a good case where it hasn't actually been defined as a rule. How much PSI is too much PSI on a straight? We've had 2 races this season in Canada with George Russell, and now the British Grand Prix with Oscar Piastri. Both times it was Max Verstappen behind, by the way, where braking on the straight as part of the safety car has caught drivers out. And I wonder if maybe there's a call or a need for us to actually sort of, not us, but the FIA to actually define what they mean by that, because you leave yourself open to, I think, unfair penalisation, as was the case here, in my opinion.
I guess this is the thing with rules, isn't it? Is that in a sport like this, with changing regulations and evolving technologies, you're never going to be able to get ahead of every possibility. That's why rules are iterative and changing and mutable. So yeah, maybe this will drive some kind of set of rules around that. But let's move on. Speaking of rumours around the paddock, and obviously we try not to get too into these because no one really knows the truth. But Christian Horner he didn't look like a happy guy even after Max qualified first, and when interviewed about Max's P1 quali, he talked a lot about the team, but not about Max, or not much about. He kept avoiding talking about Max, and I just wondered. Again, I was sitting on the sofa chatting to my partner about this. I just wonder what is going on there. We don't know his contract. We can't see his contract, but we believe there's a clause in there about his position in the driver standings, and if it drops below third, I think is the consensus that he has the right to exit his contract. Christian doesn't seem like a happy guy. There seems to have been meetings going on between the Verstappen camp and Toto, which has obviously caused a cascade of questions around if that was to be the case, if Max was to take a seat at Mercedes, would he take George Russell's seat, or would he take Kimi's seat? Anything that you've picked up on this kind of ongoing? It feels like the biggest story in F1 right now. If Max went to Mercedes, I think it would be on par with Hamilton going over to Ferrari. It has that kind of, maybe it's even a bit spicier.
I think it's worse. I think it's a bigger story than Hamilton.
Worse or spicier? Yeah, spicier.
It could be all of those. I think it could be the end of Red Bull Racing. I think if Max Verstappen leaves Red Bull and goes off to any other team, because as I think we've seen, Red Bull Racing is pretty much a one-driver team. They almost actually look like both not quite top tier team and a midfield team at the same time. They've somehow managed to pull off that unique outcome. Yeah, I think if Max goes, then the whole house of cards is at risk, and I think that's a much bigger deal Mercedes seem to be doing just fine without Lewis Hamilton. Arguably, perhaps they're doing a bit better with one of their drivers anyway. So I think that's a big deal. But from watching Verstappen, he doesn't seem to want that outcome. If it's about performance and it's about driver standings after a certain round, he has a lot of power to affect that outcome. It's harder for him to go higher in the standings, but it's very easy for him to go lower in the standings by simply underperforming himself.
He's not that kind of guy. He's not the kind of guy who will underperform to get out of a contract, I don't think. He doesn't strike me as that kind of person who could switch off that killer instinct just to play a bigger game. Do you know what another great thing about a wet and wild race like this is, Jace?
Go on.
Is at lap 14, seeing Lance Stroll in P4, Hülkenberg in P5, Gasly in P6, and Ocon in P7. Seeing those kind of lower tier team drivers sitting up there. And I think even by lap 25, I'm just looking back at some notes, at lap 25, Stroll was third, Hülkenberg was fourth, and Gasly was fifth. It was absolutely fantastic to see. We know how it ended with Hülkenberg getting on the podium, but to see some of these other drivers who just never really get a taste of sitting up in, like Lance Stroll in P3, that made it even more entertaining. And it showed how much tyre strategy, or maybe not even tyre strategy, when you came in to, not the tyres you went on to, but coming in for tyres at the right time, it really shook the order up, didn't it?
Yeah, it totally did. It gave me flashbacks to Albert Park, actually. It was like the first 2 laps, maybe first 10 laps or so. By the end of that, 3 drivers are out, and it's that sort of wet to dry situation where they're really struggling to maintain grip as they're going around a treacherous circuit. And you do get upsets, and you get strategy and timing coming in to affect the outcome. As the grid was forming up, practically half of the grid were in the pits getting a fresh pair of boots on. And then there were 2 races happening at the same time, where there was the lead pack of those who decided to brave it out and stay out on the intermediates, and then those who'd come in for slicks. And yeah, you see some winners and some losers. Stroll, he certainly was an early winner. Didn't quite work out for him in the end.
He got some points.
He got, how many points? 6 points. Yeah, it's a good result for him after
That's good. Good for
a
Stroll,
pretty torrid season. But yeah, Leclerc, on the other hand, he was not a happy chappy. I wrote down at one point, Leclerc is a total weapon this round. He just seems to be coming from nowhere and dive bombing into turn 3 or turn 4. He was all over the place. And there was a funny moment towards the end of the race where they got on the slick tyres, where there was showing a reverse shot from Hamilton, who'd gone off, and behind him, Leclerc had gone off.
I know.
At the same time. Oh my God, that was hilarious. You sort of, all you can do is laugh or cry in these moments if you're a Ferrari fan. But yeah, I mean, it was the tyre choice and the timing, as you say, that those 2 things coming together really shook up the order.
The woes of Franco Colapinto. This poor man, qualifying last, and then I think he went out on lap 3, didn't he? He stalled in second gear in the pits and on lap 3 and went out. And I think his seat is seriously under threat. Rumours of Bottas or Doohan being lined up for his seat, but I can't see him lasting much longer, sadly.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? If that is his last round in that seat, it'd be terrible. It's only Colapinto and Doohan who haven't scored any points at all this season so far. So if Doohan comes back, he'll have a chance to correct that. And if it is...
Correct. That'd be good to have another Aussie on the playing field.
Or we could have Bottas, who's sort of an honorary Aussie. He's like half an Aussie. He's got the mullet and his partner's Australian. So, we kind of claim him as well. So he could be the honorary second Aussie on the grid.
Ollie Behrman thought he had a really tough time. Obviously, he a bit like a... Well, sorry, I shouldn't say this because you don't agree, but I was going to say a bit like a Piastri driver error. But he had a bit of a misstep in quali, didn't he? And he was at safety car or it would have been a red flag. He sped down the pit lane and wiped out in quali, and ended up getting relegated to, what did he start at? 18th. So he actually qualified really, really well.
I mean, to watch a driver do so well at their home circuit in a Haas, qualifying 8th, mega job.
And then he gets his 10-second penalty for his misstep, speeding down the pit entrance. And then he fights his way back from P18 to start with and ends just out of the points, sadly for him, at P11. But it was great to see. I think what was great to see about that for Ollie was the fact that he didn't just give up and just kind of sit there for this race feeling sorry for himself. He fought back to P11. I think that's a result he can be proud of.
Yeah, and it's a shame. I think Tsunoda had this last year a fair bit, that it's a shame they don't award points for people who come 11th. Tsunoda had something like the highest number of P11 finishes in 2024.
What are you saying? If you get 4 P11s, you should get a couple of points?
That's a good idea. Yeah, maybe get partial points further down the order. Yeah, I mean, Ollie Behrman, what a story. I mean, for him to be able to come out and just knock people's socks off in qualifying in that kind of machinery is stunning. He had a really messy race, though, as you say. And there were a few clumsy moments there. Tsunoda tagged him at one point coming into left field. And then he also had a moment coming together with his teammate. So, a bit of a scruffy weekend all round. But yeah, to finish 11th in those conditions as well. And there were moments there where I thought, is he going to get Russell? Is that going to happen? This is getting close, getting spicy.
Absolutely.
Can we talk about Piastri? I'm not sure I agree with you that he was a locked-in winner for this race if he hadn't had that 10-second penalty.
Go on.
So I was watching the time between Piastri and Norris after he got the penalty. So beforehand, he looked really, solid. He was going to run away with it. But then the gap between Norris and Piastri kept coming down and down and down. As they went on, their intermediate tyres were getting older. It seemed like Norris had the edge on Piastri. So he was catching him. And I was thinking, if the penalty hadn't been there, there's a good chance that Norris would have overtaken him either in the pits or on track. As it turns out, he had to sit in his car for 10 seconds waiting for that penalty timer to count down. But then when he came out on slicks, he wasn't able to close the gap. I think it was Norris's win, actually, and Piastri being so salty afterwards. It's good that we see the emotion, but I actually think he came off worse for that. And I don't think it was his win that he thinks it was.
Yeah, I actually think I agree with everything you said. Because, I found myself frustrated at Lando in the opening laps when Max and Piastri went flying off. And suddenly, Lando was 3 seconds behind. And I was like, what are you doing? Get after them. And it kind of that kind of gap grew and grew and grew. And I have in my notes here, I think Lando played this race as a man waiting for things to unfold in front of him, patient, lying in wait, and when the moment appeared, he was there to take advantage of it. And actually, we've talked a lot about this idea. I think Brundle once said, Piastri's got great racecraft, but Lando's maybe got more race pace. And actually, I think as soon as Piastri dropped the racecraft bit today, Lando pounced and released that raw pace. So I do agree with you. I think that's a good observation. He was really, really hunting him down.
I was really sad that on the post-race interview in the cool-down room afterwards, Piastri just couldn't find it in himself to say a single nice thing about his teammate winning his home Grand Prix. You could see just how much it meant to Norris to win that race, that round at home in front of the Norris grandstand. That, to me, that was disappointing that Oscar couldn't find it in himself to say anything nice or positive about his teammate doing what he did.
Yeah, especially after Lando in the interviews, the post-race interviews, was kind of singing Oscar's praises and saying, kind of coming very much in the opposite spirit, which is easier to do when you've won, but I agree. I think you nailed it though when you said, I think Piastri really felt hard done by, and we'll see in the coming days as people talk about it more, and maybe the drivers themselves talk about it more, whether he changes his mind on his behaviour behind the safety car. Lewis would have been a 12th or 13th consecutive podium for him. I think the last 11 races in a row, he has ended up on the podium at Silverstone. So there was a bit of my heart that was a little bit sad for Lewis coming in fourth. It would have been nice to make that a 12th and keep that running streak alive, but it wasn't to be, even though the Ferraris look quick at times this weekend.
Yeah, quick but difficult to handle. And I was
lots of snaps.
I was so there with you when I was watching the last few laps tick down, and you think, do I want Hamilton to be able to overtake Hülkenberg and to get that 12th podium, or actually do I want the right outcome to happen, which is what happened today? And it was funny because I like Hülkenberg, but I wouldn't consider myself a fan. But Lewis, absolutely, diehard Lewis fan. And to actually cheer him not succeeding was a funny place to be. But it was like...
Totally felt the same.
It was the feel-good result of that weekend. But man, so Ferrari, they had some real pace this weekend. And as I think was happening in FP1 and FP2, the sessions I saw, it was really windy this weekend at Silverstone, and it's a very flat circuit, so the wind can have more of an effect than it might at some other circuits that have got hills or things that kind of get in the way of the airflow. So the Ferraris, they were putting in some blistering lap times, and then along comes qualifying, and the pace just seemed to sort of disappear. In qualifying in Q1, Lewis only just made it out. He was P15, if I'm not mistaken. He nearly got knocked out in Q1. And then he came good again in Q2 and qualified, I think, on 4th or 5th for the race. So they had moments of brilliance throughout the weekend. But then, as he said, this car doesn't really like wet conditions. So just like what happened earlier in the season in Albert Park, the Ferraris, they really struggled to keep it on track.
Let's talk a little bit about upgrades and about packages, and in particular low downforce packages. McLaren bought a new floor to this race, seemed to work out for them. It's hard, isn't it? Because they didn't seem entirely convincing in qualifying, and yet in race pace, it almost felt like a vanilla car in qualifying, but in race pace in the race, it really shone. Red Bull, only Max brought a new floor. They didn't give it to Yuki. And Aston also had a new floor and engine cover. And actually I think the Aston Martin did really well in this race. So maybe some of their upgrades are working. We had both Stroll and Alonso finishing the points. But the critical thing I want to talk to you about is low downforce packages, and when they work and when they don't, as evidenced by Max's car. Any thoughts on that, Jace?
One of the things that blows me away is that the grip at the rear is even less than what it would normally be. And when you add to that the wet conditions and the windy conditions, it's actually kind of amazing that Max was able to keep the car on the circuit at all. He had one spin that ruined his race for him completely after that safety car restart that we talked about earlier. But the level of skill that he brought to the race today, to be able to bring that car home, given the low level of downforce that his car was generating, was just phenomenal. What did you make of his race and what he was able to achieve?
For those who just want the most basic understanding of downforce, you want a high downforce package if you've got a track that has relentless corners, hard corners, long corners, anything to make you stick. And you want a low downforce package if you want to get straight line speed, so the car isn't sucked so hard onto the track on the straight line. So what happened with Max's car was that in qualifying he was able to... They set Max's car up for very good straight line speed with low downforce. And like you said, Jace, the fact that he managed to handle that car and the slippery back end around all the brutal corners of Silverstone was amazing. But I also think that's kind of where his race came undone. In wet conditions, that becomes even more perilous to have that kind of setup. So I don't know whether whether Red Bull were not expecting that weather. I don't know if anyone was. It's Britain. It's changeable. But yeah, I think it just goes to show, to set a car up purely for qualifying can really undo you when conditions like wind and rain step in. That package that you choose, because of part Ferme rules, you've got to stick with it. and he had to stick with that. And he did incredibly well to control it. Actually, have that spin and to claw himself back from 8th to 5th was also pretty impressive. So nothing to hang his head in shame about that race, I don't think.
And the other part of that is when the racetrack is wet, because of all of the rubber that gets put down by every car going by every turn of the circuit, that rubber makes that part of the track slippery. So you actually have to drive on different parts of the racetrack that you would normally drive on when it's wet. It really did catch drivers out. So Leclerc spun at one point and then drove straight through. The same thing happened to George Russell, but instead of spinning, he was able to keep the car straight. Same thing happened to Oscar Piastri. They were all struggling out there with these kinds of changeable conditions, and it was amazing. And to see Verstappen finish 5th after such a race is truly astonishing. It's a huge achievement. Can we talk about the rookies?
Yeah, let's go for it.
This was a rookie chaos race. Only one rookie finished, and that's Behrman, who we've talked about already. Every other single rookie driver failed to finish this race, whether it be...
And Hülkenberg.
and
Sorry, that was bad.
And
bad
Alonso.
Joke.
Alonso's a rookie this year, apparently. So Hadjar, in the spray, goes right up the back of Antonelli, knocks him out of the race. Oh, that's a mistake. Bortoletto puts on slick tyres, goes off at farm curve into the barrier. Not so good. Liam Lawson, probably the unluckiest driver out of this lot. He got taken out on lap 1 just by Tsunoda and Ocon and Lawson all trying to take the same turn at the same time, which was never going to happen. As they say, 3 into 1 does not go. This was a tough race for the rookies, have to say.
Really tough. That's all I have to say about that.
Can I say, I've got a stat for Antonelli, by the way.
Go on.
He is now the worst performing Mercedes rookie in F1 of all time.
Go on.
So Mercedes drove in the Formula One World Drivers' Championship in 1954, 1955. Then they quit, went away. They provided power units for other teams in the 90s, but they didn't come back into the sport until 2010 when they brought in Michael Schumacher and Nico Rosberg. And since then, they actually haven't had a rookie driver. They've never employed a rookie driver for either of their seats. Yeah. They brought Valtteri Bottas across from Williams. They brought Lewis Hamilton across from McLaren. They brought George Russell across from Williams as well. They've never actually hired a rookie driver since 1954. And now Antonelli is the worst performing one in that entire history of Formula One racing.
Oh, wow. That's some great trivia. Love that.
I'm still a fan, though. I don't care. He's going to turn it around. It's going to come good. Don't you worry. Pierre Gasly, that Alpine has been driving around at the back of the field all season, and he somehow, through good driving, good strategy choices, right tyre, right time, he managed to finish 6th, which is astonishing. So, two thumbs up to Pierre Gasly for pulling a rabbit out of the hat this round.
Absolutely fantastic drive from him. So strong. So consistent today. I say today, last night. Mate, I was shaking. I was literally shaking in the last 7 laps of this race because I know we don't talk about, or I don't talk, you always go on about it, but I try not to talk about who I'm a fan of. I'm a little bit of a Lando fan, just a pinch, just a fraction. I was shaking that he was going to kind of put it in the wall, have a classic Lando wobble. Do we think Lando's kind of... Is he settling into that world championship mentality?
Yes.
Is something settling?
Absolutely.
Come on.
Yes. Oh, man. At some point, I'd love to understand your mindset when it comes to accepting fandom. I think there's something there that we can delve into, but maybe that's the topic of a different podcast. But absolutely, Lando Norris, he was on fire today, and he just nailed every corner. I remember there was one funny exchange over the radio after Piastri had gone off at Maggots and Beckett's, and Will Joseph came on the radio and said to Lando, Oscar's gone off, be careful. Yeah. And he's like, where? Tell me where. I want to know so I don't make that very same mistake.
But it was more than that. It was like, don't just tell me that he came off. Tell me where he came off.
That was so cool. And yeah, to watch him on the podium, Oh, speaking of the podium, I don't know if you're aware that there's this big Lego F1 partnership thing at the moment. They're cross promoting each other like crazy, and they had Lego trophies. That's what the drivers actually took home. It wasn't the sort of metal winners trophy. It was actually a recreation of that made out of Lego. It was pretty cool.
Amazing.
And the I think you might have said this to me at one point. The 50 meter, 100 meter braking marker boards, they actually had little knobs in the top to look like they were made out of Lego. It's pretty cool. I like what's happening there. But I've been thinking about fandom with Lando, and whilst I predicted that he would win the championship, feels like 2 months ago, and I've flip-flopped a few times on that, I wouldn't say I'm a Lando fan. I'm not at baseline a Lando fan. And as an Australian, you might think that that's for a particular reason, especially this season. But actually, it goes further back than that. And it's because when Daniel Ricciardo came to McLaren with all that noise, fanfare, and pomp, I thought, this is going to be so much fun. Lando and Ricciardo, two fun, lovable larrikins getting on together and winning races and doing all that good stuff. And then Ricciardo just flopped. He flopped big time. And I remember there being moments where Lando would say comments in the press, and he was 21, 22, so he's a young guy, who cares? But he would say things like, it's not my job to help Daniel drive faster. And they're just sort of stuck with me. I'm not happy with that kind of thing. And when McLaren dropped Ricciardo for Piastri, which was the right thing to do, for a while there, I was dirty with McLaren as a team as well. I've kind of come around to that since time's moved on. But yeah, there's something about fandom that is emotional, and I think we shouldn't repress it, Gav. I think you should let it out. You should live the fan experience. Don't hide your true self, mate.
Can I explain to you why I try not on this podcast to talk about who I'm a fan of? Well, because I just don't think, like, I tell you, let me be, I think it's great that you do, but I think that listeners will have their own fan favourites, and I don't want to come across as a biased podcast who gets all excited about their drivers doing well. I just don't think that's a very enjoyable experience. People always complain that Sky TV, all the commentators are all pro-British, which they basically are, and it kind of leaves a bit of a sour taste in people's mouths if you kind of support a driver from another country and deep down the commentators are just basically just going for the Brits, which they kind of in a very thinly veiled way. So that's my reason. I think it's nice maybe that, why don't we do this? You wear your heart on your sleeve, talk about the fact that you've got fresh rubber for Kimi and Lewis, and this will be the only podcast that I get really excited about Lando, just because I think he's on a turn. But from now on, you won't hear me being biased towards any driver. I love them all. They're all my extended family that I've never met and never will. But that's my thinking.
Fair enough. I like it. I tell you who was the biggest loser from this weekend. Catching strays. This goes to show that in F1, you can still be the biggest loser more than 11 years after you retire from the sport. And that's Adrian Sutil, who, thanks to Hülkenberg getting his first podium after 239 races, Sutil is now the holder of that unwanted record of the most number of races without ever scoring a podium. So brutal. Yeah, that's just, there you go.
He would have been cursing into his popcorn.
Oh, well, he's a fellow German, so I think he would have been saying "yeah" and cheering on his countrymen as he came home. And also, it's so nice to see someone experience something new at such an age. You often see drivers get their first podium. We were celebrating Kimi Antonelli getting his first podium in Montreal, and he's a young guy. The career is all ahead of him. But to see Hülkenberg at the ripe old age of 37 experiencing something new like that was just beautiful.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Should we close by just looking at where the constructors are at right now? Would that be interesting?
Well, I think that's a great segue, considering we're talking about Hülkenberg. Let's look at where the constructors table stands.
Yeah, there's been a bit of movement, hasn't there? We've now got the most interesting number to me is Racing Bulls and Aston Martin sharing the 36 points a pop piece. I can hear you clicking on your keyboard to bring it up. And Kick Sauber up in 6th. ahead of both Racing Bulls and Aston Martin, Haas and Alpine. So, yeah, some interesting moves there. McLaren have just run away, haven't they? 460 points. Their nearest competitor is Ferrari at 222, more than double away. But, as we've talked about before, the race for P2 and the constructors is keenly on for Mercedes and Ferrari, with only 12 points separating them.
Yeah, I was keen on Mercedes earlier in the year, and now I'm less confident, I'll have to say. They've been underperforming. Their car hasn't been performing as well as it could have, I suppose.
What do you mean they've been underperforming?
It's been a matter of...
George has finished in the top 5 in almost every single... Oh, he didn't. No, he didn't today, did he? He's every race but 2. He's finished in the top 5.
It's a team game, and half of the team is not performing.
Yeah, Kimi is an
he'll come good. Don't worry, it's fine.
I'm not worrying. I'm trying to reassure you. He's had some tough luck, I would say, but I think the second half of the year we'll see Kimi come alive. That's my prediction.
I think just like this show, your rookie season is the season where you figure all the stuff out and you make all your mistakes. So yeah, and I appreciate where you're coming from in terms of fan bias. But I'm a ride or die kind of guy, so I'm still a Ricciardo fan, even though he flopped big time when he was sitting next to Lando Norris. And I think Kimi will come good. But the other thing that's interesting about that is, will Williams be able to hold on to P5? That seemed like it was a lock just a couple of rounds ago. But if they keep having weekends like they did this weekend or last weekend when Sainz didn't even make it out of the formation lap and then Albon retired early, I think for the second time in 3 rounds, Williams is certainly not going to hold on to that P5 position. And at this point, it looks like it could be a Sauber P5, which would be a phenomenal result in their final season before they become Audi.
Yeah, that would be remarkable. And then we've got 22 drivers on the grid next year, don't we? And 2 new seats up for grabs.
Checo Perez making a comeback. What do you think?
Oh, it's hard, isn't it? I've heard Bottas not only being touted for the Alpine seat, but being touted for that new seat as well. So I feel like we'll see Bottas back next year, is my feeling. And yeah, maybe Perez. You'd kind of, if you're a new team, what do you want? Do you want the winner of Formula 2? Do you want to pair a rookie with a really experienced, kind of wise head, safe pair of hands? Who knows? But it's going to be fun to see that seat filled.
Yeah, and I think it might end up being Perez at Alpine before Bottas, because I think the scuttlebutt I've heard on this is that it's about the funding, and Perez can bring a lot of it. So I think that'll make the decision easy for Alpine. But do you really want to go to that second Alpine seat? I'm not sure that's a good outcome. And Paul Colapinto, I was thinking about him earlier. If he doesn't get out of this conundrum that he's in, and he finds himself out of the sport, where do you go? Because he wasn't F2 champion. He wasn't F2 champion material, frankly. So where will he go? Will he go to IndyCar next? Will he have a crack at
NASCAR? Goes to NASCAR.
Truck racing, mate.
Yeah,
hilarious. Yeah. Oh man, what a round.
I'm going to chuck. What a round this is, and by the way, guys, we are halfway through the season. Half our races are done. We've got the second half to look forward to. We've got Belgium coming up. What an incredible track. Anything that you're particularly looking forward to about that track? Any bits of historical trivia that you want to pull up, Jace, or just excited? Just excited.
I love that circuit. I think it's got that amazing downhill, uphill section just after the start of the lap. It's in the mountains, so it's often quite wet and rainy. Brilliant circuit. I hope it stays on the F1 calendar forever. That's another one. I think Silverstone, I could not get enough of the British Grand Prix this weekend. I was, you said you were tingling in those last few laps. I actually didn't want the race to end. I was just loving every minute of it from start to finish. It was the atmosphere, the crowd. That circuit is amazing. This year, the camera work from F1 has just been next level. It was just great. I was grinning from ear to ear from start to finish, and I'm hoping that the second half of the season gives us more classic, iconic, amazing, wild, wet and wild races like we saw at Silverstone.
And do you know what's really cool?
Tell me.
Max Verstappen will hate this, but we've still got 4 of our 6 sprint races to come, which I absolutely love. More racing, more fun.
Bring it on. You've been listening to the Fresh Rubber Podcast. See you at the Apex.